Social or physical distancing has affected billions of people around the world. The government has told us to stay at least 2 meters away from each other to stop the spread of the coronavirus. While walking down the street now, you might see someone look you in the eye, half decide in their mind which way to go, then avoid you. While this might be motivated by a noble desire not to pass on the virus, when it happens enough times, you begin to think it's just you. This can be painful. It makes you feel less human. It can make you feel othered. But it is only for a time like this, which will surely pass. There will come a time when your neighbor breezes past you or embraces you with a smile or a hug. Life will be back to normal. For many people, however, being distanced by others has been their lifelong normal. The rise in hate crimes, England versus Bulgaria football match, the views about foreigners and people of color during and after Brexit, and the disproportionate number of people of color dying of COVID-19 all contribute to a feeling of exclusion and isolation. If you're like most people in the UK, you get stomach cramps just thinking about the idea of talking about race. If you're honest with yourself, you may be one of those people who say, "Oh no, here comes a black man coming to tell us that we're bad for being white." All too often, statements are interpreted as personal accusations, rather than to reach out to understand the content. We respond in a defensive and protective posture. In many cases, even statements of racial facts and statistics, such as definitions of racism, disparities in income and education, segregation of neighborhoods, hate crime figures, and so forth, are met with defensiveness from a white demographic. Defensiveness and dismissiveness are words I would describe the usual reactions to conversations about race I've experienced. I hope that we might be challenged by the Spirit of God to reflect on our uncomfortable postures, our disinterest, and our tuning out. In John 3, Nicodemus asks Jesus, "Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God, for no one can perform the signs you are doing if God was not with him." Jesus said, "No one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again." Then good old Nicodemus said, "How can someone be born again when they are this old?" We don't just discover Jesus' soteriology, but a reality of humanity. The exegetical idea is seeing. There is a blind spot. Nicodemus was a person of high status, and he was admired by people around him. He was faithful and religious, but he was completely and utterly blind. He was blind to the kingdom of God. He was blind to everything around him. The kingdom of God is not a world that submits to ordered reality, and is not the one that uses natural eyes. The kingdom has kingdom people that seeks first God and his justice. The church is blind to our siblings in pain because we are using natural eyes. Reno Edo Lodge, and why I'm no longer talking to white people about race, says white privilege is the absence of the consequences of racism, an absence of structural discrimination, an absence of your race being viewed as a problem first and foremost. Within a theological lens, Bishop Tom Wright says, "The gospel is the announcement that everything has changed in the coming of Jesus, and it leads us to a new kind of living. It's the kingdom of God's lifestyle with allegiance to the King as the ultimate restorer. Kingdom people recognizes our own biases and embrace people anyway." Earlier this year, the Anglican Church apologized for deeply institutional racism. The church commented and said that it was ashamed of its racist history. That same week, after rejoicing for progress, I received a letter that caught me off guard. It said, "Dear Augustine, thank you for your application. I'm afraid that despite your obvious gifts, we do not think it's worth pursuing a conversation about accuracy. We are not confident that there is a sufficient match between you and the requirements of the post. Firstly, the demographic of the parish is monochrome white working class, where you might feel uncomfortable. I wish you well as you seek the future God has planned for you. DDO. Princeton theologian Voss said, "We live in the already not yet. Therefore, there will still be racism, and we are called to do better, to live like the kingdom is near." The Archbishop of Canterbury said that the church's hostile environment must become hospitable and welcoming. He called for a radical and divisive progress to end racism in the Church of England. We must work towards a radical new Christian inclusion. Accessibility is being able to get into the building. Diversity is getting invited to the table. Inclusion is having a voice at the table, but belonging is having your voice heard at the table. Is this radical new inclusion? Are the wonderful and beautiful brown and black bodies being heard at your table? Or have they not even been invited to the table? Can they even get into the building? Does your table look more like a table of bank executives or like the kingdom of God? We are kingdom people, and kingdom looks like the prophetic vision in Revelation. After I looked and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from every tribe and peoples, and languages, standing before the throne of God, before the Lamb, clothed in white robes. We must move from exclusion to embrace. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Any church that stands against integration and has a segregated body is standing against the Spirit of Jesus and fails to be a true witness." It's not about cheap diversity, but belonging. The church can invest in multicultural education that has a strong anti-racist orientation, which is the utmost importance for helping children, as well as adults, develop non-racist identities. Individuals who have come to recognize their own biases and beliefs and prejudice, and even their roles in perpetuating racism, and the pain that obviously has been inflicted on people of color, and their privilege that has advantaged positions in societies, may feel overwhelmed by the multitude of problems. But God is not colorblind, and neither should we be. This is authentic kingdom living. This is radical, inclusive discipleship. We wait for a future glory. And until we wait and see that, we will sing the old Negro spiritual, sung over and over by my grandparents and my great-grandparents. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday.